Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about Project Icebreaker and just a quick background. Now, the person I'm going to be correcting and clarifying the misinformation that they're spreading in the space is from Kurt, and it all initially started from me calling Kurt out because of his connecting the dots type of research. And I just basically say that he's the sort of person where his research is mostly based on connecting dots. And what I mean by that is if he sees terms like bridge asset, neutral bridge, DLT, ISO 20022, all these keywords, interoperability within documents, then to him it must mean XRP and the XRPL. So when the Project Icebreaker document came out, he did a post saying, so the Icebreaker Hub can use a neutral bridge. Now, neutral bridge means to him XRPL for cross-border payments. Interesting. And just to further prove what I'm saying, that it means XRPL to him, because people like to gaslight and say, oh no, he didn't explicitly say it, but they never explicitly say it. They're getting smart now. These misinformation spreaders are now implicitly implying things. Okay, so they don't come out and fully say it, and they implicitly say it, so it gives them room to then deny saying it. So here, this guy, Utility, says, I'll say it. They will use XRP as the neutral asset. There are no other options. That's a bold statement. And then Kurt basically agrees with him. I thought Kurt is supposed to be knowledgeable in this space. I mean, if this guy came on my post and said it, I'll correct him. But Kurt definitely says, yep, I'm definitely aware. So therefore, Kurt agrees that Project Icebreaker is using XRP. So he is saying it. I'm definitely aware. Plus, this got introduced back in September as well. So they're doing their testing now. So basically, he's aware that they're using XRP and they're testing on it now. And there is a particular blockchain company already partnered with service providers in these three countries. And again, connecting the dots. So because Ripple is partnered with the countries involved in Project Icebreaker, that means they must be using XRP. And if you watched my previous video where I exposed his trail of thought when it came to Enbridge, it's very similar to this. He was like, oh, Thailand, UAE, Hong Kong are all partnered with Ripple, therefore Enbridge must be XRP. And it's the same trail of thought, the same thinking, the same low standard of research, connecting the dots. He's applying here for Project Enbridge. Yeah, some things are not in black and white. So he's saying Project Enbridge refers to XRP, but they're not explicitly saying it. You may have to think a little, but there are always signs. What are the signs? The signs that he's mentioned. You can tell people didn't put puzzles together when they were younger. Okay? And here he says it again. Here is an example of being intuitive and applying critical thinking. Now, this is Kurt's level of critical thinking. His level of critical thinking is these countries are mentioned by Ripple, so therefore, whatever they work on when it comes to DLT projects, or even if it's not DLT projects, if it's just involved in that realm, then it must be XRP. If you are familiar with Project Icebreaker, you know the three countries that were involved. Now, the three countries that were involved were Israel, Norway, and Sweden. Now, below is page 5 from Ripple's CBDC white paper in 2020. I guess Ripple just randomly chose these countries to list. And let me give you an example of this form of connecting the dots. It's like saying Amazon operates in many countries around the world. So if any country you see around the world talking about online marketplaces for shopping, okay, then they are automatically talking about Amazon. It's stupid because it doesn't work like that. There's many online marketplaces for shopping. It could be eBay, it could be Etsy, it could be, there's so many online marketplaces, but no, because Amazon has a partnership with these countries, then everything must be Amazon. And that's his critical thinking level of research. So that's the background to this video, Project Icebreaker, and I'm going to be debunking whether Project Icebreaker is using XRP or not. And by doing that, I'm going to show you guys how to do the research. Because again, another thing people say to me is that you're just a normie, or they imply normies, people like me who are not in IT, haven't got a tech background, which is true. We can't read these documents. And the reason why we can't read it and understand it because we have no IT knowledge. Whereas Kurt, on the other hand, he has the ability to comprehend these documents better than a person like me. Now, let's see. So Kurt's stance is XRP. My stance is let's look at the documentation and see what they're actually saying. And a few things I would like to look out for here is let's see, for example, what Project IceBreaker is. We're going to check out what Project IceBreaker is. We're going to see how Project IceBreaker works. And we want to look at as well how Project IceBreaker sources liquidity and so on that's involved in how it works. And let's just see whether it's talking about the XRP, XRP ledger, and so on. So let's get started. Project IceBreaker, breaking new paths in cross-border retail CBDC payments, March 2023. So I'm going to not read the entire document, but look for parts that's relevant to what I'm trying to find. So here is the forward, and it says the project was a collaboration between the Bank of Israel, Norges Bank, and Riksbank, and the BIS Innovation Hub. So Israel, I think that says Norges, I don't know how you pronounce that, Norges Bank, and Riksbank. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, but Israel, Norway, and Sweden, basically, those banks, and the BIS Innovation Hub. So we know who are involved in the project. Plus, I would like to say there's a video where someone from the Bank of Israel, I believe, actually said that they're the ones that were behind Project IceBreaker. That they built the system, which is funny because if it's XRP and XRPL, then shouldn't the people that built the system be Ripple? Anyway, so let's look at the executive summary. While domestic payments have been significant improvements in many jurisdictions in recent years, cross-border payments still face challenges such as high costs, low speed, limited access, and insufficient transparency. The G20 has made it a priority to enhance cross-border payments, and in response to this, called for action. The BIS Innovation Hub is coordinating experiments on how this might be done. Okay, so they're trying to solve the issues that comes with cross-border payments, and that's part of the G20's agenda to enhance cross-border payments now, which is why you see so much work being done on this space. So many central banks are exploring retail central bank digital currencies, RCBDCs. Some of these projects are at the proof of concept stage, while others are in pilot trials, and a handful have reached some mature phases. The requirements for interlinking these RCBDC systems to support cross-border payments should be considered at the outset, so that cross-border payments can be enabled when appropriate. So bearing in mind, they're talking about interlinking, domestic RCBDC systems. So imagine every country has their own internal domestic retail CBDC infrastructure. Now, what they want to do is to enhance cross-border payments between these domestic, internal, retail CBDC infrastructures is to interlink them, and that's where Project IceBreaker comes in. We even know that the XRPL, its main focus is dealing with wholesale CBDCs and not even interlinking retail CBDCs, but that's besides the point. Let's continue. Project IceBreaker explores a specific way to interlink retail CBDC systems, and they're using the hub and spoke solution, with several additional features that would allow the IceBreaker model to be readily scaled up. In addition, these features would promote simplicity and interoperability, reduce settlement risk, and foster competition and transparency for cross-border retail CBDC payments. And now it talks a bit about the IceBreaker. It talks about the settlement risk and speed. So in the IceBreaker model, a cross-border transaction is broken up into two domestic payments. Hear this out. If you just go onto page 6 and just read the executive summary, this tells me that Kurt didn't even do this. Okay, it would explain to you here how the model even works, how it settles. In the IceBreaker model, a cross-border transaction is broken up into two domestic payments, one in each domestic system. That's basically telling you, that how the IceBreaker works, it doesn't actually move payments between domestic systems. Rather, the payment actually happens within the domestic system itself. So there is no actual movement of value from one country to another within this model. Rather, the payment actually occurs internally within the domestic payment system. And RCBDC therefore never leaves its own domestic system. How can this be the XRPL? This is page 6. I haven't even really got into the document. This is the executive summary, and it tells you the retail CBDC therefore never leaves its own domestic system. So if the retail CBDC is in Thailand and it's going to do a payment to another retail CBDC that's in Israel, the actual CBDCs do not leave the systems of Thailand when making a payment to Israel. How does that work? We would talk about that. However, with the XRPL ledger, it would move from wallet to wallet. And that means because the CBDC is actually moving, it means, okay, that is actually left the domestic country to the ownership of another wallet that's in another domestic country, whereby that country has the keys for that wallet, for example. So there's actually movement when it comes to settlement. But with this project Icebreaker, the retail CBDC doesn't even leave the system. It stays within its domestic system. It stays within the country. This is because Forex providers buy one currency in one system and sell the other currency in the other system. So they rely on people that make the market, Forex providers, FX providers, to basically buy one currency in one system and then sell the other currency in the other system. They facilitate the exchange, and they do it not as a result of actually moving the CBDC from one system to another, but just have the FX provider to buy the currency in one domestic system and the other domestic system sell for the other currency that the recipient is waiting to receive. An FX provider therefore holds retail CBDC supporting wallets in 2 or more wallet systems. You see how they do this? Settlement is via an atomic payment versus payment arrangement using hash-locked contracts. How settlement actually occurs is via an atomic payment versus payment arrangement. And when you see atomic payment versus payment, it's basically describing an instantaneous swap between two currencies. It happens more or less instantaneously, okay, and it happens more or less at the same time. So two payments occur at the same time between two different currencies, and one does not happen unless the other one happens, if that makes sense. So that's how it works. And they use hashed time locked contracts, which is basically like an escrow sort of system. And we're going to see how they do this, okay, without actually moving the CBDC between two actual systems, but they do it in this manner, and which can be thought of as similar as a digital escrow. So people from the XRP community were connecting the dots by saying hash-locked contracts, HTLC, digital escrow. The XRPL uses digital escrow, which is true. Therefore, this must be XRP. And that's not how you do research. Just because the XRPL has this feature, that's not to say there's no other system out there that can also incorporate it. You have to understand these features are not exclusive to the XRPL only. And this is something the XRP community fails to understand over and over again. And these are people that claim to be in IT. This eliminates the time gap between payment initiation and settlement, going a long way towards eliminating counterparty risk in the FX transaction. So they're saying using a digital escrow eliminates counterparty risk, and it also eliminates any time gap between payment initiation and settlement in this manner, and so on. So in most existing competition and transparency, in most existing cross-border payment systems, the end user is bound to its payment service provider for FX services. In the IceBreaker model, the FX service and pricing are decoupled from the provision of retail CBDC payment services. And here it's basically saying that when you look at most cross-border payment systems, okay, whoever is providing the FX for these systems, then they are usually connected to the payment service. But in the IceBreaker model, they are not giving favoritism to any FX service provider. And this is how they open a free market when it comes to competition or prices in this IceBreaker model, because they are not giving any wallet preferences when it comes to the FX provider they want to use for the exchange rate. Rather, they're having like a free market system, and the FX provider that gives the best value or the best price and that's cheapest for the customer is the route that the payment will take. So FX providers submit FX rates to the IceBreaker hub, which selects the best rate to be presented to the payer for each payment request. This lets the payer access competitive FX rates, exactly what I was saying, independently of the payment service provider providing the end user with a digital retail CBDC supporting wallet. Yep, so they've taken away the possibility for the wallet to choose their favorite FX provider. Rather, they've decoupled the two, so it's a free market when it comes to who is going to be competitive at providing the FX rate for the IceBreaker model. Additionally, the risk of insufficient liquidity in the desired bilateral currency pair is mitigated not only by the presence of multiple FX providers, but also by using bridge currencies. And this is the key. This is the wording here that got the XRPL community going in a frantic. They saw the word bridge currencies, and we know XRPL is a bridge currency, so automatically this is the XRPL. But what you have to understand here is what this document has taught me is that the concept of using a bridge currency, and by the way, there are other institutions and DLT systems as well that use bridge currencies. So I don't know why every bridge currency has to be XRP, but the concept of using bridge currency is not exclusive to the XRP ledger. So it's saying here in the IceBreaker model, if there is a risk of insufficient liquidity between two currency pairs, okay, then this could be mitigated. And it's very similar to the XRPL as well, how it works, this concept of using bridge currencies, but it doesn't make them two systems the same. It could be mitigated not only by the presence of multiple FX providers, so they can mitigate the risk of not enough liquidity by having various FX providers, okay, or it can use bridge currencies. And I'm going to show you how they do it in this system as well, and we could see whether it's the XRPL. This could have potential in promoting competition between FX providers and making FX fees more transparent for end users. Okay, and now it talks about the interoperability and scalability of the system. The number of connections between retail CBDC systems are kept to a minimum by the hub and spoke approach. And I'm going to explain to you what the hub and spoke approach is as well, used for the IceBreaker model. The IceBreaker hub only routes payment messages. There you have it. The IceBreaker hub only routes payment messages and does not act upon them. Guys, I'm on page 7 now actually. And this is still the very beginning, the executive summary. I believe I'm on that section. And it tells you here, the IceBreaker hub only routes payment messages and does not act upon them. Kurt, you're finished, my friend. How can you tell me the IceBreaker hub is the XRPL when it only routes payment messages? For one, the XRPL doesn't move messages. The XRPL system moves cryptocurrency, digital assets, and it's for settlement. It actually moves the value. It doesn't move messages. What deals with the messaging in the XRPL system is RippleNet. So RippleNet handles the messaging, routes the messages, and then it uses ODL and the XRPL, okay, for settlement. Now the IceBreaker hub, which Kurt is implying implicitly that it's XRP route payment messages. But I'm the guy that has no idea what I'm talking about because I can't read a document, because I have no IT knowledge. And Kurt is this guy that's put on a pedestal and he can't even read up to page 7. So the IceBreaker hub only routes payment messages and does not act upon them. The only information it acts upon is the data from FX providers, which are used when identifying and selecting the best FX rates for the payer. So this tells you here, and this is why basically the retail CBDCs are domestic. Do you remember I said they don't leave their actual system? Because the IceBreaker hub, doesn't actually move CBDCs. It's not a DLT system. There you have it. It's not a DLT system because it only moves payment messages between different domestic DLT systems. It cannot move actual cryptocurrency like the XRPL ledger does. And what other system do we know that functions in this manner, whereby they only move payment messages? I will discuss that as well in this video. But I've already there's another system and solution out there that I debunked like 4 months ago, where I was showing people where everyone was saying it's the XRPL ledger because they use the term bridge, and this system doesn't even move DLTs. It only moves messages, just like the IceBreaker hub. So the IceBreaker model only wants to work with retail CBDC systems or connect to retail CBDC systems that have the following requirements. So these CBDC systems that it connects to must be a functioning payment system and operate in real time or near real time. In other words, it must be live all the time, 24/7, 365. It must be able to implement and support the use of HTLC, which is the escrow, and there are participants in each retail CBDC system that can act as FX providers. So what this tells you here is that it can connect to any retail CBDC system that has these following technical requirements. The IceBreaker Hub, in order to enable communication between the systems. How does it communicate between these different domestic retail CBDC systems? By routing payment messages. And it talks about what CBDC systems, retail CBDC systems they worked with in this project. The project focused on core features only, including the technical solution for the IceBreaker Hub, the integration of the 3 proof of concept retail CBDC systems of Israel. So they used Ethereum-based Quorum. They used for Israel Quorum. And people that, if you don't know what a Quorum is a fork of Ethereum, okay? And it's interesting to know that Zinfin as well is also a fork of Ethereum. So to assume that Quorum in and of itself, because it's a fork of Ethereum, is unscalable is not true, because Zinfin, which is a fork of Ethereum, which is a fork of Quorum, okay, is very scalable. So just being a fork of Ethereum in and of itself is not an indication that the network runs like Ethereum, because the reason why they fork it is to make changes to it, to improve it, and so on. Otherwise, they'll just use the actual coding of Ethereum without making any tweaks to it. So it's a fork of Ethereum, but obviously there's tweaks to it to make it scalable for institutions and enterprises. Okay, so Norway is using Hyperledger Bisu, and that's also Ethereum based, and Sweden is using Corda. So we have 3 different retail CBDC domestic platforms, each using different ledgers: Quorum, Hyperledger Bisu, and Corda. And the project IceBreaker, the IceBreaker Hub, can connect these 3 together. The project IceBreaker shows that central banks can have almost full autonomy when designing their domestic retail CBDC system. So it doesn't matter how central banks choose to design their retail CBDC system. They could also use, for example, the XRPL private ledger for a retail CBDC system. For example, it doesn't matter so long as the CBDC domestic system has these requirements of functioning 24/7 and can basically support escrow, and they basically have participants that can provide FX, then they can potentially connect to the project IceBreaker and the IceBreaker Hub, and the IceBreaker Hub can then interlink that system with other domestic retail CBD systems around the world in order for interoperability between them. And the IceBreaker Hub only moves messages. So it gives you the definitions of words. And here is the payment versus payment. It says a settlement mechanism that ensures that the final transfer of a payment in one currency occurs if and only if the final transfer of a payment in another currency or currencies take place. So 2 currencies, payment occurs in one if it also occurs in the other. So it's like instantaneously. They both switch or swap together and they both happen at the same time. That's the condition. That one settlement does not take place unless the other settlement takes place. And they refer to that as payment versus payment. The funny thing is, I pretty much explained nearly 80% of everything without even reaching the introduction. All of that was in the executive summary. So a lot of it is going to be repetitive or maybe just more detail because I've explained it all. The overview of the model used for Project IceBreaker. So it talks about the overview is that it's domestic retail CBDCs. I'm going to see if I can look for a diagram, and it talks about the FX providers. And let's just see how the FX providers actually work. So the IceBreaker model facilitates cross-border payments by interconnecting retail CBDC systems. Remember, it doesn't move payments in and of itself. FX providers who are members of multiple retail CBDC systems would exchange retail CBDC in one currency for retail CBDC in another currency. So what does the swap who are involved in doing that is the FX providers. So they would have a wallet in both retail CBDC systems and they would help with the exchange rates and so on. So in essence, they would buy in essence, they would buy one currency in one retail CBDC system, paying with the other currency in the second system. So it gives an example. If Alice in Sweden wanted to pay Bob in Israel, the FX provider would buy the Swedish krona and sell the Israeli shekel. And that's how it works. So in one system, the FX provider would buy the Swedish krona that Alice wants to send to Bob, and in the other system, they would sell the Israeli shekel. And that's how they provide the settlement. The actual currency did not move from Sweden to Israel. It's just that there's an FX provider that has access to both systems, and in one system they buy one currency, and in the other system they sell one currency. And all of this information is facilitated by the IceBreaker model, which doesn't actually move any value. It just handles the messages going through each system, the communication between each system. So an FX provider could be any entity. Example, a financial institution holding wallets in 2 or more retail CBDC systems. So they can be FX providers that is willing to take on risk to facilitate payments. The cost of holding and managing liquidity would, together with the FX risk, be reflected in the spread between the buy and sell rates offered for each specific currency. And that's where they benefit from. They take the risk and they try to benefit from the spread between making these conversions. So the IceBreaker Hub platform, 2 main functions. It functions to route cross-border payment messages between domestic systems. You see, the IceBreaker Hub cannot be the XRP ledger because it only routes messages. It does not actually move value or settle value. Providing a marketplace, and the other thing that the IceBreaker Hub does is that it provides an FX marketplace whereby you can get quotes, FX quotes from FX providers, and that's what it does. Okay, now here we have a diagram, and what does this diagram look very similar to? If you guys have watched my content, okay, and I've spoke about this 4 months ago, this diagram looks very similar to the SWIFT system. Connecting digital island CBDCs. Let's scroll down to SWIFT. And what system are they using? They're using the transaction manager. Here we have it. Look at that. Don't they look very similar? We have 3 retail CBDC systems. We have 3 retail CBDC systems. CBDC A, CBDC B, and a real-time gross settlement system. It could be CBDC C or just a traditional system. And then here we have the IceBreaker Hub, and we have like these gateways sort of things, and we have messages. In the SWIFT system, we have the SWIFT transaction manager, and we have ISO 20022 messages. The transaction manager, which is called the SWIFT platform simulator, acts as a router, and the IceBreaker Hub, as I've shown you, also acts as a router for messaging. In the SWIFT system, okay, and guys, I've spoke about this 4 months ago when everyone in the XRP community, when SWIFT came out and said that they're introducing a transaction manager bridge, everyone, when I say everyone, it's like so many people were just coming out and saying SWIFT is using XRP, yay, interoperate because of transaction manager bridge. 4 months ago, look, this is I went through it. Look, you can see it in the video. I went through that. I went through this exact document in detail, 20 minutes explaining how it worked. Clearly, Kurt doesn't watch my content. Okay, otherwise he would have known this. And here, another video as well, I spoke about the transaction manager, and I made it clear, Swift's transaction manager bridge is not XRPL. And I spoke about it here again, 3 videos on this topic 4 months ago. As soon as I saw this, I was like, oh my days, this is very similar to the Swift's transaction manager bridge model. I understood it straight away. So in this system, ISO 20022 messages, basically if you watch my video and you understand how this system works, then you would also understand how this system works. It's very, very similar in concept, okay? So the Swift system doesn't actually move any value, it just handles messages. And when it comes to settlement, it happens in a way whereby the CBDCs don't actually leave their domestic systems, but because of this transaction hub communicating between them, they are able to settle without actually moving value between them. And this is not the XRPL concept, neither is this. So we have the Bank of Israel and their Quorum retail CBDC. We have the Norway, and I can't remember what their CBDC system is. Was it Corda? And we have Sweden and they have their own Hyperledger BSU CBDC. And then we have the IceBreaker Hub, and then we have the messaging that it receives between these systems. And also the IceBreaker Hub handles the FX marketplace, whereby it handles price routing between the different FX providers, providing the best price to the customer within these retail CBDC systems. And that's what the IceBreaker Hub does. Yeah, that's what that. So this is basically the overview of the system, and this is exactly how it works with the Swift system. And this is a new document released by Swift, and it shows you again an example. Here we have the Quorum blockchain, R3 Corda, and we have an RTGS, and then we have the Swift transaction manager that can basically handle routing of messages between the two, but it doesn't actually deal with settlement of value. And Swift has come out and said this anyways, that they don't actually deal with settlement, they just handle the communication. And the funny thing is, people like Kurt actually thinks this is the XRP system. So back to this video here. So where does the bridging aspect comes into it? So what basically happens here is, if the FX provider cannot get a good rate, okay, for the Bank of Israel's currency and the Swedish currency, there's no good rate, or there's no liquidity between the two, but there's liquidity between all of them as a result of the Norwegian currency, then they can use one currency as a bridge. And that's what it means by bridging in this project here. And I'm going to see if I can get to that section where it talks about it. It talks about it here. So illustration of the use of NOK as a bridge currency. And to illustrate how the IceBreaker Hub can bridge gaps in the exchange rate table by using intermediate bridge currencies. And in this example here, when it talks about bridge currencies, it's not talking about a neutral bridge asset like XRP. In this particular example, it's actually talking about a bridge currency that's another CBDC or retail CBDC. So assume that a Swedish payer wants to send money to an Israeli payee, and that no FX provider can offer a bid rate for the SEK to ILS, which is the Swedish currency, to the Israeli shekels. Okay, so the IceBreaker Hub bridges the SEK/ILS gap by proposing NOK, which is the Norwegian currency, as a bridge currency. It identifies the rate from FXP2, okay, as the best rate for exchanging SEK for NOK, and the rate from FXP1, and then it obviously facilitates the transaction. So again, all of this is not actually done as a result of moving cryptocurrency between each system. It's just domestically, because the FX provider has a wallet in each retail CBDC system. So once the IceBreaker Hub communicates between them, all that happens is domestic moving of value based upon the messages received without actually moving value internationally, if that makes sense. But eventually the conversions happen domestically and the funds are released to the recipient. So from the recipient's perspective, it's like, oh, they sent funds from Sweden to Israel. From their perspective, it's as if they made an international payment, but with the way the system is set up, their money didn't even actually move cross-border like that. It just moved from their wallet to the FX provider's wallet, and the hub communicated to the FX provider's wallet in another CBDC system to now release funds. And the FX provider has to have wallets within each domestic system for this system to operate. So it talks about communication and connectivity, and it says here, in practice, the ISO 20022 standard would be used for the messages routed by the IceBreaker Hub, and it's the same here in the Transaction Manager Hub. ISO 20022 messaging was used, and if you look at this system here with the Transaction Manager Hub, it was I've done videos on this, but all it was is payments being moved, funds being locked in escrow. Eventually the payment messages, when I say payment being moved, I mean payment messages. Eventually the payment messages told the funds that are locked up in escrow from intermediary A to intermediary B to release the funds to the customer. And it's the same sort of setup right here. Okay, then we have policies, and that's pretty much basically it. So as you can see, it's pretty obvious and clear that this system here, which relies on messages, okay, This system here is not, it's not the XRPL because it doesn't function like the XRPL tool. And the way they get liquidity is from FX providers. It doesn't actually move value. It's not using a neutral bridge asset mechanism for liquidity either. And the bridging mechanism is basically relying upon another CBDC, but it's not actually a bridging mechanism in terms of how XRP operates. It's more of a bridging mechanism as a result of FX providers having wallets in each system, and which communicates via the IceBreaker hub, and then bridging occurs without actually moving any value between any of these systems. Anyways, as you can see, this video is going to come to an end now. Kurt has no idea what he's talking about when he says neutral bridge for cross-border payments and implying that it's basically the XRP, and because Ripple is working with those countries. If you just read this document up to page 6, you would see that the IceBreaker model is not the XRPL, and it functions completely different, and it's very similar to the Swift Transaction Manager Hub. That's all for now. In my next video, I'm going to be breaking down Project mBridge, and let's see whether that's the XRPL or not. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification icon so as to not miss my next video. Take care and goodbye.